Chapter 60 New Construction. You are listening at novelfull.audio. She accepted Ji Lin's request, leaving the priestess beaming beaming. Hopefully, she won't mind me squeezing the temple into the farmland. But hey, she's the goddess of life, right? She should dig being surrounded by plants. Gotta leverage that 5% plant growth bonus. Combine that with the mill, and we're at 15%. Then, stack on the output bonus from the floodplain. Perfect. He could practically taste the autumn harvest. The spring wheat harvest yielded over 100 mu, averaging 100 mu each. Without fertilizers or modern seed selection, that's already amazing. Even in ancient times with advanced agriculture, the best wheat yields were barely over 100 mu. The system's superior fields and various hidden efficiency boosts are largely thanks to those killer seeds, a grand total of 160,000 tons of wheat. Grinding it all into flour at a 70% yield only gets us 112,000 tons, which is roughly 56,000 hectares. Sounds like a lot, but if each person eats 1 liter of flour per day, that's only enough to feed 1,800 people for about 60 days, barely 2 months' worth. He's planning to make pasta, but the berries from before are almost gone, and there's not much wild rice left. Pasta will shake up the menu. We're talking salt, noodles, meat, and some spices. The territory's salt production is enough for daily needs, with a little extra to sell. After buying spices, we basically break even. Lean meat noodles it is. That way, we can stretch the meat supply. Chongshan can figure out if we can bump meat consumption from every other day to daily if noodles replace rice. This planned economic model should ensure we don't run out of anything crucial. Most territories are still struggling to get enough to eat, so luxury items will have to wait. The next wheat crop looks fantastic. He's checked the fields, they're thriving. From the watchtower, you can see nothing but green farmland. The young sprouts, as long as forearms, sway gently in the breeze. Once the autumn rice harvest comes in, 1 mu each, along with 600 mu of cotton, 100 mu of ginger, and the sugarcane plantation, he'll finally be out of the woods with food security, and the territory's food and production will enter a positive loop. He recently discovered that crystal or fuel could boost the blacksmith shop's output, so he laid out a ton of agricultural areas. The blacksmith shop expanded to 7. Any more, and he'd run out of smiths and carpenters. All production is now focused on civilian farming equipment. Iron tools are way more efficient than wooden ones, so everyone can cultivate more land. Too bad the harvest won't be ready before the exercise battlefield, and the resources can't be converted into combat power. He's pinning his hopes on the engineering college, which is almost finished. After it's built, he'll have 10 days to arm his army. Hopefully, the college churns out some serious firepower. Drawing from an automobile and steel world line, Ji Linwan was hyped for the upcoming dean. Both the dean and the research supervisor are heroic units above level 5. After all this time, Chongshan is still stuck at level 1, so he knows how hard it is to level up. Chongshan and Changheng were stuck in a city of hundreds of thousands of people back then, struggling to gain any experience. To run the academy properly and turn a profit quickly, you need a dean, someone who can attract students, organize events, and oversee construction. If people come to study, they'll pay tuition. And if the tuition's a little inflated, well, what else can he do? The territory's so broke it can barely keep its head above water. All the resources from upgrading to the first era went straight into infrastructure. The landlord's cupboard is bare. 100 musketeers, backed by 100 hunting spiders, plus 100 independent scout spiders, and maybe 200 new light crossbow archers. They finally shook off their debuffs and went from unfinished training to new recruits. That's it. That's all the troops he's got. He remembers clearly that the first exercise battlefield was a multi-person battle. A guy brought his whole army and got nearly wiped out. They faced a mixed force of a dragon lord and dwarves. A real slugfest. That meat grinder left a mark. His rat men, holding shields and spears, were useless against the Type 1 red dragon. The spears couldn't penetrate the scales. Head-on combat was a no-go. The rat men could only keep the dragon from taking off. They relied on the barbarians' clubs to smash it hard, grinding the red dragon down with blunt force. this next battle will probably be even tougher. He's not too worried about theocracy undermining him. The higher the stability, the more the people like the Lord. And the more educated the city, the harder it is to convert people. They're practically indifferent to religion. You can't touch the gods, but you see the lords all the time. The people know that those far-off gods can't do anything for them, but loyalty to the Lord can get them real results. Besides, there are no gods, only divine arts. Speaking of which, they finally chose the best-looking priest of light. Life should come first. Gotta admit, they have interesting taste. That green dress is gorgeous, and it's white silk. He gave the goddess of life priest's costume designer a silent thumbs up. Lords in his past life also like to design uniforms for the army or academy. Whether it's strong or not is a matter of one version, and whether it's handsome or not is a matter of a lifetime. He didn't design the uniforms for his old territory's academy, so he's definitely going to make the engineering college uniforms look amazing. For entertainment, he bought some tea house blueprints when he had the money. People can relax and chat in the tea house in their free time. Of course, there's no tea, so he's using diluted sugarcane juice as a substitute. Caffeine is addictive, and so is sugar, so it's a stand-in. Some people might ask, since he could buy ginger and salt from the market, why not use tea leaves temporarily? You can steep them multiple times, and still get some tea. Tea is crazy expensive, like 30 gold per unit. These merchants are highway robbers. And some rare stuff called spirit vein tea costs 30 gold for 1/10 of a unit. Diluted sugarcane juice is way more cost-effective. The expeditionary army has a bad habit of stretching every penny. They want to split $1 into 2 pieces. Good luck getting supplies approved. The territory has no monetary system, which is like dancing with chains. 2 more updates coming today. Chapter 61 The First Church. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The priestess bought supplies from him with gold, which was way easier than hauling them herself. But she was a one-woman show, nothing like the later teams with dozens, even hundreds, of people. For the promise of gold, Ji Lin sent some muscle to help her out, and just like that, the territory had its first church. Out in the boonies, far from town, a building the size of a house stood in the middle of the green fields. You might expect the church of the goddess of life to be all green, but it was actually pretty traditional. Square walls, light brown tiles that shimmered in the sunlight. And a light white steeple that could be seen from miles away. Out front, in an open space, was a statue of the goddess of life surrounded by green branches. The priestess had brought the statue, and she'd planted seeds and used a life spell to get the branches growing. They wrapped around the marble statue, giving it the perfect finishing touch. When Ji Lin went to visit, he found her planting seeds around the church. She said she wanted to grow herbs, and with the energy from the nearby farmland, they'd grow fast. She was personally taking care of 4 acres of herb fields. She planned to use the herbs to make basic medicines, both internal and external. For the church, they'd be a lot more effective than anything from his herb house. The territory didn't even have a real doctor yet. More herb houses wouldn't solve that problem. You need people to run them. His 2 administrators, Chongshan and Changhan, only knew basic first aid, but priests of the various gods usually had some medical training. These priests could bring down the territory's healthcare costs. She was thrilled with the church's location. It's a ways from the center of town. If you need it, I can have people bring you food and meat. It's just too far to deliver every meal. Wheat flour is 2 gold for 3 grams, pickled meat is 1 gold for 1 gram, and wood is 0.5 gold for 1 gram. Then he noticed the priestess looking a little sheepish. She was strapped for cash. Ji Lin had already taken 200 gold from her for the building materials and land. Since he wanted the herbs and a doctor, Ji Lin let her buy on credit. The territory didn't have a herb nursery yet, so he'd borrow the church's. He didn't feel bad about his shrewdness. Maintaining friendly relationships was a good idea. Build multiple friendly relationships and you could trade for resources you needed. Ji Lin didn't demand absolute loyalty. He just needed people to stand with him when things got tough. To do that, he had to teach them right from wrong, give them the power, the know-how, to tell the difference. In the real world, everything could be broken down and understood. They didn't need to believe in magic. Instead, magic could be a branch of science. Whether it was magic, runes, or divine arts, they all led to the same thing: crack the code, all mysteries would eventually fade away under the light of day. If you ignore all the cool technology out there, civilization will never grow up. That's what a lord from the Star Age had told him. Countless lords were stuck because of this problem. They couldn't even make it past the Industrial Age. He definitely wanted to move faster. Besides the priestess of the goddess of life, a merchant rolled into the territory with a wagon full of goods and set up shop on House Street. The territory had 60 houses now, and they were all full. 2 rows of brown stone and wood buildings lined the stone street in the middle. The locals called it House Street. 2 small canals ran along the sides of the street to carry away wastewater. Special crews cleaned the canals every day to keep things tidy and prevent mosquitoes. The clean streets, all uniform and in order, were a clear contrast to the crummier wooden houses nearby. The merchant knew what he was doing. The people in these nice houses were probably doing okay for themselves, and they'd be more likely to buy something. He'd been sitting there for almost an hour. People would stop and stare, curious about the stranger and his wares, but nobody was buying anything yet. They were all waiting for someone else to go first. Some guys from the pioneer team spent a little of their money. There weren't any salaries in the territory, but blacksmiths got to eat more meat than others. They were getting 1 gold a month, and they wanted more. Wu Bai, the guy in charge of domestic affairs, went straight to Ji Lin when he heard about the merchant. Ji Lin was checking to see if the new seeds he'd planted in the floodplain were sprouting. The harvest this fall depended on it. He just wanted to see the land he owned, the green fields that had sprung up thanks to him. It gave him a great sense of accomplishment. Next, he went to find Chongshan. Chongshan was collecting salt down on the coast. The salt fields produced coarse salt once a week. They dissolved the coarse salt in water and filtered out the sand. Then they'd load the salt into a cart and take it back to the territory. Actually, it was just him doing all the work. Why don't you take a break? We should wait for the Lord before we make any decisions. Wu Bai, wearing a blue dress, ran over to the merchant, who was about to lose his patience, and handed him a glass of sugarcane juice, explaining how things worked in the territory. The merchant nodded like he understood. The sun was getting low when Ji Lin finally arrived. The merchant's wagon was carrying some books of folk tales, some books about plants, and some glass bottles and jars. He also had some carrot seeds. As long as the seeds weren't system processed, they could be planted. You could never have too much food, and this would add some variety to the territory's diet, even if he didn't like carrots. The merchant's wagon was pulled by these docile cow-like animals, but only half as strong as a cow. Ji Lin spent a good chunk of money to buy 2 of them to replace his manpower carts. When it came time to pay up, the merchant noticed the men from the territory bringing back a cart full of salt from the coast. He offered to trade for the salt instead of gold, and even give him a discount. The merchant left with a cart full of salt. Everybody got what they wanted. I will update it later. Chapter 62: Dean and the School of Engineering. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Time. The man in the white robe said. The young man, dressed in a sharp brown suit, straightened his tie, grabbed his suitcase, and began to fade, like he was dissolving into the air. Su Shan knew he'd been chosen. Guess this is goodbye. The shadow beside him started to say something, then just waved, saying goodbye to his friend. He watched his friend disappear, a streak of light fading into nothing. The last glimmer faded. The engineering college, built right on the ocean, was finally finished. White walls enclosed the whole campus, and you could see the tall buildings with pipes snaking all over their exteriors. The college covered about a square kilometer, with 1/10 of that built over the water, waves crashing against the supports. The system's description didn't fully capture what these buildings could do. As a specialized college, the engineering college had 3 buildings regular colleges didn't, a testament to its unique features. The world of steam and steel was famous for its advanced engineering and rune technology, surpassing even the engineering of Ji Lin's current era. This college inherited that legacy: engineering college, mechanical runes, facilities, experimental manufacturing factory, engineering laboratory, auditorium, teaching building, dormitory, experimental manufacturing factory, a small assembly factory for testing machines and experimental equipment. Operates at 50% the efficiency of a standard factory. Engineering laboratory, crystal mine enables technical research. Research speed plus 5%, engineering/technical research speed plus 10%. Teaching building, a fully equipped 3-story building with 2 large classrooms, each seating 120. Admissions office, allows student recruitment after establishing a post or post-related buildings. Bonuses, plus 15% scientist generation, plus 15% mechanic generation, plus 15% magic craftsman generation, plus 15% territory attraction, plus 5% for being built by the sea, territory unique, expandable. The musketeers were now just an early game bonus. They'd help Ji Lin get started, but the engineering college would let him compete with the other lords in the top tier, give him a solid foundation, and geniuses would emerge. His choice of blood purity wasn't as immediately impactful as some civilization traits, so he had to compensate with other advantages. The completion of the engineering college was a game changer. It meant his territory could move from just buying blueprints to designing and building things themselves. He was the only one there to see it finished, everyone else was busy working. He didn't want to make them put on a show just to celebrate. The college was on the coast and far from the central town, so it would just waste their time. Ji Lin walked toward the intricate iron gates of the college. A guy with a suitcase was standing there, waving. He was wearing a sharp brown suit and half-rimmed glasses. He looked smart. The dean he'd chosen had arrived right as the college was completed. "Hey there, Mr. Lord. I'm the new dean. You can see my stats, so I won't introduce myself." The man held out his hand and bowed slightly. Su Shan, Dean, level 5, traits, excellent educator, plus 30% student efficiency and increased attraction of top talent, technical expert, a seasoned technical expert who can be assigned to any research project, all-rounder, proficient in runeology, mechanical engineering, physics, mathematics, and rune engineering. Can teach all these subjects, nice face, good at schmoozing, making a great first impression. Increases initial goodwill. This guy was top tier. The excellent educator trait alone told Ji Lin he'd made the right choice. A research supervisor might be better at pure science, but they'd need someone to lead the researchers. It would be tough to do all the research alone. 30% more student efficiency. Maybe he could charge 30% more tuition. This college was supposed to jumpstart a commercial zone and a school city, which could mean serious revenue. Too bad there weren't any special resources in the area. Want me to show you around the engineering college? Yeah, let's do it. My pleasure. The dean bowed again. Walking along the tree-lined path, Ji Lin felt like he was back in school, strolling the campus, without worrying about the future. The sound of waves snapped him back to reality. His school wasn't on the coast. This is the teaching building, placed here for easy access. But there aren't any dorms yet, so we might need to build a couple over in this area. Ji Lin looked where he was pointing. There was a clear, empty space with no grass, like it was being saved for him. It was his first day at the engineering college, but he knew everything. You're probably wondering how I know so much about this place. Su Shan paused. Well, I designed and built this engineering college myself, based on the terrain. Huh. I thought the system did that. Ji Lin was confused. He knew you could tweak the system's blueprints, but he didn't know heroes could redesign the plans. I could, but after you appointed me, I could redesign the plan and change the college to a structure that I thought was suitable. See, the experimental manufacturing factory is up ahead. I put it right on the coast and built a reinforced road leading in, so if we're moving big equipment, it doesn't have to go down the main road. Su Shan pointed to the land next to the factory. 1/10 of the college was built over the ocean, and half of that was taken up by the factory. The other half was extra space reserved for a dock. With this design, the factory could assemble land vehicles and ships. I've saved space for a dock right here. When the time comes, we can build it and the factory will have water access. Great design. Chapter 63 Cavalry. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After the dean's explanation, Ji Lin nodded, admitting his own weakness. His planning skills. Not the best. He could ditch the unnecessary stuff while still making things look good, but his architectural vision felt too rigid, everything had to be perfectly aligned, every building in its place. It felt tedious and stifling, but beyond the layout, he had a more pressing issue. How can I boost my combat strength, and fast? Maybe you could assign me to lead research, Mr. Lord. I'm ready for a new challenge, like director of the research department. Ji Lin checked his administrative panel. Sure enough, alongside the town center manager positions, a new option had appeared, Director of the Research Department, appoint a director to initiate research projects, he tapped the option and appointed Su Shan. Director of the Research Department felt like a placeholder title, the position's name seemed to depend on the territory's research building. If he had the Xantiantai for magic research, the title would be Sishianjian. If it was the Fudaeguan for talismans, it would become Fushisheng. Then there was the rare observatory for training astrologers, top-tier special effects and combat power. Right now, according to the system's timeline, everyone was still stuck in the age of cold steel. Lords in this era, where weapon development was slow, could afford to take it easy. In a cold weapon battle, a single hero could carve a path to victory, but Ji Lin wanted more than that. He wanted to face the monsters and mayhem of his own time. Appointed, Dean Su Shan as your research department director, the dean had that same inside knowledge vibe as the other hero units, like they knew more than they should about why the system had dragged them into his service. The system might throw them a curveball now and then, but generally, it had their backs. Sonoda, on the other hand, was a wild card. This was new territory for him. Hold on, let me see what projects are available. Su Shan, now the director, closed his eyes and scanned the list of authorized projects. He muttered in disbelief, no way. City Heart Steam Core is a project, sneaking this in now, sorry. City Heart, project. Our city is growing rapidly, demanding a powerful energy source to sustain it. This project, the City Heart, requires a complete redesign of our energy supply system, creating a network to match its needs. City Heart, Steam Core, multiple branches, time consumption, unpredictable. Steam Core. A revolutionary engine designed specifically for crystal lore, the brainchild of a true genius, merging the finest principles of symbol and mechanical design. Through continuous cycles, it achieves a peak thermal efficiency of 75% using crystal ore. Steam Core unlock, time consumption, 5 years. Besides those huge projects, the dean spotted something more immediately useful for Ji Lin. Hunting Sentinel directly upgrades existing troops, enhancing their stats after integration. 30mm small caliber infantry support cannon, another direct troop upgrade. Ji Lin figured these 30mm cannons would be devastating against armored targets. Steam Spider Frame. The Steam Spider Frame mechanized soldiers appeared alongside the Blue Crystal Oregon. But would they even be manufacturable once developed? He had his doubts. Su Shan seemed to read his mind. If you choose the basic Steam Spider infantry support cannon, I could try to get you an experimental model, not the finished product. Failure rate might be a little higher. He grinned. Probably just a glitch in the system. It makes sense to build experimental models during development. Su Shan winked, as if assuring him that he could pull it off. How fast can you build steam spiders? Ji Lin asked, excited. Infantry support cannons were good, but they'd mean replacing some of his current gunners, trading rapid fire for armor penetration. But his gunners didn't need more armor penetration, they could pierce any armor when facing giant beasts. He really wanted those steam spiders from the trial run, those monstrous, charging mechanical cavalry. If I can get Chongshan and Changheng, plus at least 20 workers, helping me out, we could manage about 1 per day. The territory's steel isn't great, so I'll have to spend extra time on the runes. Su Shan held out his hand, a swirling blue-white cloud of energy filling his palm, far more source energy than anyone else in the territory possessed. This will let me carve the runes much faster. That was pretty efficient. 10 days could get him 10 temporary steam spiders, the power of a level 5 hero. I don't know exactly what kind of steam spiders you've seen, Mr. Lord, but I guarantee I can deliver on their performance. Just to be safe, the dean gave a cautious disclaimer. Good enough. Performance didn't matter if he couldn't get them. Cavalry was his biggest weakness. He needed cavalry for patrols, but he feared a cavalry charge, like how any field army in the 21st century had to have air defenses, even if they sucked. You couldn't just let the enemy's air force bomb you with impunity. He needed real heavy cavalry. Just the presence of that unit was a deterrent. If these steam spiders were scary enough to deter an enemy charge, that would be a win. With the plan set, Ji Lin breathed a sigh of relief. He just had to wait 10 days for the system's exercise, a small test of his recent efforts. Then it hit him. One last question. Do you know Gina Sonoda? The dean opened his mouth, caught off guard. A huge red warning banner flashed between them, the system's omnipresent monitoring cutting off their conversation. Warning, do not disclose any information. They understood instantly. Chapter 64, One Day of Work in the Territory. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hey Chongshan Da. Morning. The paper mill clerk was waiting at the door bright and early, like he knew Zhongshan would be there. He'd already gathered and stacked the rough, yellowish paper, packed it into wooden crates, and loaded it onto the cart. The papermaking wasn't exactly high-tech, but it was good enough for textbooks. Thanks to this paper, their accelerated elementary education program was a month shorter. Most people could learn to write and do basic math in that time. And that 10% boost from bloodline purification definitely helped. The subtle, long-term effect of bloodline purification would gradually raise the upper and lower limits of the category. Good morning, you're up early. Thanks a lot. Zhongshan nodded. It rained now and then, a light drizzle, shrouding the territory in a gray curtain. On days like that, people stayed home from work. Those who'd learned to read and write would gather and share stories. These stories came from books donated by the private school, tales of the Xia civilization's mythology. There were also books Shang had brought, filled with stories they created. All still used the same written language. It was a new form of entertainment for the territory. There were always a few folks who could really bring the stories to life for everyone else. People didn't mind the rainy days. Work wasn't too demanding, and if you didn't finish today, you could just pick it up tomorrow. Rainy days meant a little extra rest. Meals were delivered door to door by neighborhood watch members pushing waterproof carts. It was pretty basic, just big wooden barrels of rice and vegetables, nothing fancy. Coastal areas always got a lot of rain, especially those with plenty of plants. The papermakers constantly had to be ready to protect their bark paper from sudden downpours. If they weren't on duty, they'd always bring the paper that had been laid outside to dry, back inside. The next day, they'd put it back out. After a few days, the damp pulp would dry in the hot sun, turning into slightly yellow paper. No problem, no problem. I just stayed here all night, didn't want the rain to ruin the paper. The papermaker beamed. But you, Chongshan Da, you're here to pick up the paper this early. Zhongshan smiled, setting down the cart he'd been pushing. I've got some errands to run. Wu Bai should be here to pick up the paper later. I actually have some work later. You want to come with me, or hang out with your friends? Zhongyan nodded. The kid was an orphan. There were a few orphans in the territory. If you asked him his name, he couldn't tell you. Zhongshan had to give him one. Seeing he was so quiet, he gave him a name that sounded the same as silent, Chongyan, and taught him reading, writing, and even some physics, basically training him to be the ZS assistant. He pushed the cart with a strong voice. The kid was young, but surprisingly strong. He kept up with him, even with the cart fully loaded. After dropping off the paper at the 3 private schools, he walked along the stone path leading to the School of Engineering, talking to the kid about terraforming. Zhongyan sat quietly amidst the engine oil, watching his teacher cut steel and quickly shape it with a small hydraulic press. These small presses were powered by a steam engine, fueled by powdered crystal ore. The powdered ore had more surface area, so the energy release was much faster than direct ignition. This energy was converted into steam, which was then injected into the machine, bringing it to life. He was deeply impressed by its power. Boom! The hammer fell. He watched the clumsy steam-powered spider rise from the ground, stumbling with each step. The high-temperature steam it vented was hot even from a distance. It was built using simple supports, with an internal frame structure Chongyan Jenda had never seen before. Its 6 heavy legs left shallow dents in the ground as it slowly adjusted to its normal walking posture. The transmission system, completely baffling compared to the basic physics and mechanics Chongshan had taught him, was etched with lines that glowed with an azure light, but even this power could be controlled with intelligence. How does it compare to what you saw? The flexibility is still lacking, but the power is sufficient, the walking logic requires. Let's test it over longer distances. The adult's voices buzzed in his ears, the words and terms they used confusing him. So, what do you think? Want to learn? Zhongshan's voice came from behind him, and he nodded enthusiastically. Yes. And just like that, the School of Engineering got its first student. They grilled seabirds and fish for dinner. After the project was done, Changheng and Su Shan went fishing with improvised fishing rods on a platform jutting out into the sea. It was far from the shore, basically open water. Fishing was a nice break after a hard day's work. The fish in these waters had never been caught before. They swarmed the bait, fighting each other for it. In half an hour, they'd caught 4 fish averaging around 45 pounds each. The roasted seabirds were after the big fish they had hung up, and Changheng shot them down with a light crossbow for dinner. As a former hunter, he was pretty good with a crossbow. There was no sauce, just sea salt. After gutting the birds and fish, they skewered them on a clean wooden pole, rubbed them with sea salt, and slowly roasted them over the fire. Each person got a big fish for dinner. The usually mild-mannered Dean sat with them, eating the big fish caught from the sea. He wasn't wearing his brown suit anymore, but a special engineer's uniform. Watching the 3 of them grilling the meat, Chongyan was somewhat impressed. They were really dedicated teachers, even when it came to grilling meat. After that meal, Chongyan decided he needed to learn how to cook. The 4 fish and 1 bird that the 4 of them grilled were terrible. In the end, they just cooked some plain rice and mixed in the least burnt parts of the meat. Nobody said anything about their cooking skills. Window_Taboola equals window_Taboola_Taboola.push mode, thumbs, feed 01, container, Taboola, below, article, thumbnail, 300x250, placement, below article thumbnail, 300 by 250, target_type, mix. Chapter 65 War Preparation Area. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Okay, sorry for the late update. I had a lot to think about. Time flies, and the system chime rings. Please select the troops you wish to deploy. Ji Lin chose all the units currently organized in his territory, skipping the newly trained militia. More isn't always better. Too many troops would just bloat his forces and slow them down. That would make them easy pickings in a siege, but too few troops would hurt his frontline combat effectiveness. While the Legion had more raw power, its structure was too cumbersome. Spearmen, specialized spears, 100, light crossbowmen, 200, scout hunting spiders, 200, steam spiders, 10. Hero units, Changheng, Su Shan. Please confirm your selection. Once confirmed, this cannot be changed. The cold, mechanical reminder echoed, awaiting his final decision. Ji Lin always just called his territory specialized spearmen, but the interface displayed them as spearmen, specialized spears. Clicking on the description brought up a detailed overview. Heavy spearmen wielding crystal or enhanced, high-strength steel alloy spears. Confirm. The moment he hit confirm, his territory info dissolved into light, solidifying into a medal in his outstretched hand. It featured a crossed spear and crossbow above a curved stalk of rice, all set against a backdrop of endless green fields. Spears and crossbows for the main fighting force, crops for the main food source. His lord's insignia. He held the medal in his palm, cold, iron gray, definitely made of iron. This was just the default design. He could customize it. He quietly swapped the crossbow for a spear as the primary symbol and pinned the badge to his chest. All units confirmed. Uploading to the staging area. Quota fully allocated. Staging area. A familiar place. Unlike the task book that drops you right into the action, multiplayer battlefields put you in a staging area to wait for everyone else to arrive before the battle begins. It's been a while. Ji Lin closed his eyes, feeling like he was falling through the clouds. Then he landed. He stepped out of the light column into a grand, meticulously crafted, yet welcoming palace in the Tang Dynasty style. Gilded and colorful decorations adorned every surface, and 8 massive pillars supported the imposing square roof. Hundreds of people were already waiting. The architectural style probably reflects the average level of the lords here, so this will be a little difficult, but hopefully not too difficult. Maybe. The hundreds of people here were dressed in various styles, and some of them weren't even fully human, showing mixed traits of other races. That was tied to their chosen characteristics, for example, the ones with pointy ears wearing green silk, human lords. Or should we call them elf lords now? No one noticed his arrival. The lords were already organizing themselves by race. The starting costumes of different races were very distinct. A strong medicinal smell hung in the air. They were already arguing about troop strength, but soon they'd have to put their money where their mouths are. From Ji Lin's perspective, war wasn't just a game of chess. Debating unit strength was pointless. It was a clash of entire systems, and the biggest mistake was having vulnerabilities. No matter how tough spearmen are, they can't beat cannons, and cannons are vulnerable to cavalry. Cavalry won't even think about charging a line of spearmen. Cheap spearmen in a melee-focused army are just used as cannon fodder, overwhelming the enemy with numbers. Their low morale can even disrupt friendly formations. But in an army built around artillery, those cheap spearmen are valuable for blocking and absorbing enemy attacks. The same unit can play vastly different roles in different armies. The system you build makes a much bigger difference than the raw power of individual units. He'd only shored up his cavalry weaknesses and hadn't included the god weapon artillery. His own weakness was long-range siege weapons, like trebuchets or artillery. Guns have limited range, after all. If the enemy used monster infantry instead of steam spiders, he'd be in trouble. Ji Lin found an empty corner, sat down, and browsed the forums to relax, until the cold, mechanical voice of the system boomed, broadcasting to everyone present, "Welcome, everyone. I am the executor of Civilization Endures, and I am fully responsible for this exercise battlefield. The exercise battlefield is designed to minimize internal losses and prevent infighting among lords. Military strength is vital to any civilization, and competition for resources is unavoidable. Compared to the lossless mode of the task book, in this mode, you can acquire resources by defeating other lords, which will boost your own development. The target territory's buildings used resources plus warehouse resource reserves will each contribute 10% of the total resources. The conversion ratio is 10% of the resource amount. You can obtain resources from other forces in the exercise battlefield. By any means necessary, these resources can be taken back to your own territory. The Civilization Longevity Project will be a long process of verification, and we will be monitoring you. As for what qualifies as mature, that's for you to discover. We deeply regret the incomplete civilizations caused by overcatalysis, but we will not provide any compensation. How else can we determine whether you truly deserve to become a mature civilization? A temporary lead doesn't guarantee lasting dominance. Keep this in mind. Only reaching a point of maturity will be recognized. Once you enter the exercise battlefield, chat forums and private communication channels will be disabled. That's all. Good luck. Musi Shanshur, yo, what staging area are you in? I just got in and heard the system announcement. Musi Shanshur, honestly, what it said is kinda scary. March Wood, what staging area are you in? Musi Shanshur, X13, March Wood. Ji Lin glanced up at the system of light panels hanging from the ceiling, displaying the names of the staging areas. In bright, bold letters was .x13.0, great, March Wood. There's a guy sitting on the floor behind the third pillar. You can come find him. Musi Shanshur, thanks, bro. I'll be right there. Ji Lin sighed and waited for the system to officially announce the details of the scenario. He didn't have to wait long. Exercise battlefield, gluttonous crown. Battlefield situation, royal court battle, evil beasts rampant. The last royal court, dozens of nomadic clans are vying for the throne. You can support any clan through your actions, or you can remain neutral and hunt everyone equally. Eliminating non-lord armies has a small chance of dropping a training blueprint. Evil beasts rampant, this battlefield is teeming with third-era monster infantry and behemoth units. Proceed with caution. Destroying them yields resources, and there's a small chance of getting a training or cultivation blueprint. Delivery is expected to begin in 1 standard hour. Chapter 66 Preparing for Launch. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ji Lin stood by the pillar, barely thinking, when he spotted a figure practically encased in thick green tree armor, just their head showing, jogging towards him. It was quite a sight. Plenty of people wore metal armor, but this guy was unique, completely covered in what looked like a living exoskeleton. Ji Lin almost mistook it for that living tree armor he'd given Li Yan before. What a waste to let someone else use that, he thought. Then the guy pulled up the equipment stats and sent them over to Ji Lin, who eyed them suspiciously. The tree folk made this for you, the message read. They're still really worried about you getting hurt. The guy chuckled goofily as he sent the data, condensed tree armor, rare, armor strength plus 30, second wind, this armor guarantees the wearer will survive non-critical lethal damage. False casting, this armor grants the wearer basic life-related spellcasting abilities. Armor shaped by injecting a small amount of forest spirit. Before that, it was just a seed. They really care about your well-being, Ji Lin thought. Non-critical damage meant that as long as your brain wasn't hit, this thing would keep you alive, even if your body was completely trashed. A 155mm shell. Forget it. The blast wave and heat from that kind of thing would still kill you, and even elementalization wouldn't help. But for personal use, it was seriously good gear in this era. Second wind offered lethal recovery, and the armor strength of 30 meant the wearer didn't have to sweat random arrows and stray bullets. The basic life-related spells provided standard physical recovery and wound mending. As long as you don't get a headshot, you can survive. Able to make equipment. Is he a treeman craftsman? Is a regular treeman lord developing that fast? But anyone assigned to the same exercise battlefield isn't exactly regular. Whether it was luck or talent, it needed to be assessed step by step. Maybe it was for others, maybe for himself. Hey, man, let me show you. Li Yan grinned, extending a hand completely encased in tree armor. Cracks ran across the dark brown bark, revealing the green vines tangled beneath. He'd been dying to show this off. Posting it on the forum felt lame. Finding a stranger just to brag about it felt even worse. Now, finally, he had his chance to show it to someone. Under Ji Lin's gaze, a tiny seedling emerged from a gap in the tree armor, its crisp, translucent leaves swaying gently. But it didn't stop there. The leaves rapidly grew and matured, stretching out like a seabird spreading its wings. When he tried to push his magical ability to fully manifest a life-based spell, the system immediately shut him down. He also received a warning from the system, telling him not to use offensive magic in the preparation area. It wasn't fully released, but based on his knowledge, the magic Li Yan was trying to conjure was probably something like sharp leaf dart or vine trap. He knew a little about basic spells. These basic spells were going to be the bread and butter of combat in the future. Anyone could use them, and they could be deployed en masse to overwhelm the enemy with sheer numbers. The resources and time needed to train a high-level magic user could train 10,000 low-level magic infantry. Even if a powerful spellcaster could wipe out 2,000 low-level magic infantry on the front lines, it wasn't worth it, especially since the magic infantry usually coordinated with other war machines to precisely target key targets. The marginal return was just too low. Magic. Very interesting. He wanted to try it himself. In theory, source-quality talent could make it happen, but without a spell model and a magical medium, he couldn't do anything. Those things were like modern technological secrets, no patents, but you couldn't use the tech without them. It was like having amazing fuel but no engine to convert it into energy. Why not go back and ask the priestess of the goddess of life, before, he hadn't had the talent for magic, nor had he developed that ability, when he could have learned magic. The battlefield at that time, the magic's enhancement effect on individuals was difficult to affect the overall situation, and he hadn't seen a few lords who played magic really beat him in the end. A weapon worth 100 million yuan can change a Battle, and 100 million bullets worth 1 yuan will decide a war. Just like a battery of the same volume, it is impossible to hold energy without limit. When you increase the battery capacity exponentially, you need a lot of research time. The same principle applies to magic users. The initial batteries of each race are slightly different, but the physical limitations are there. Those are the shackles. Why don't you consider using lower cost to make a few or even dozens of energy batteries, and slightly increase the capacity of low-cost batteries, and spend all your energy on increasing the limit capacity of a single battery? The exponential increase in battery capacity without changing the volume can be imagined as a staggering loss, the balance between quantity and quality. The finalization of a product requires the replacement of several generations of products. Only by mass-producing the product can the invisible defects be exposed, and finally return to a stable and efficient product output, and then the industrial joke, either less and bad, or more and good. The decisive weapon cannot save the world, and the battle of the system must end with the competition of the system. Ji Lin also bought a small stick with a built-in burning charm to light a cigarette. That is the magic version of the game machine. If you insist, the technology content of the game machine is still higher. After all, the primary thermal energy charm can be used after the development of charm science in the third era, and the game machine is a genuine modern product. Dude, wanna team up? Li Yan, not discouraged by his failed demo, was still riding high from showing off his gear. We might not get assigned to the same zone when we drop. Ji Lin didn't refuse outright. A Treeman Lord would actually be a great ally. Treemen could shore up his current weaknesses in heavy infantry and anti-infantry, and even provide some much-needed artillery support. I wonder what kind of ancient tree Li Yan chose to transform into. He vaguely remembered Li Yan mentioning that his hero unit was formed from a branch of the world tree. Even the worst ancient tree could throw with an 800 range, making it monster artillery. Plus, the tree itself had a throwing range of 450. Don't ask why, just ask that it has been hit. Once it takes root, it'll be raining projectiles and spell ammunition on your head. No spells, just pure, raw power. Most standard catapults couldn't even hit these things. You had to wait for the mortar-loading gun to come out, with its 800-plus range, to stand a chance, and the 2000 range guns that popped up in the industrial age could easily suppress them. Right now, though, the Tree Lord was at its peak. Attention, drop commencing in 5 minutes. Please confirm your status and prepare for deployment. Get ready. Random deployment. If it can find you, it may need your help. Li Yan nodded enthusiastically. As the countdown appeared, everyone stared intently at the extra display screen, not wanting to miss a thing. Beams of light descended, enveloping everyone. Exercise battlefield, gluttonous crown. Initiating. Chapter 67 Ambush in the Forest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I don't like the look of these trees. Relax. You're just being paranoid. The veteran ahead sneered. These clan recruits jump at shadows. They'd bolt for their holes at the slightest breeze. He thought, they throw these green kids into the meat grinder while the big clans fight for power. These guys were hastily recruited cavalry archers, stuck with the worst horses. Their job, ride up, fire a volley at the enemy, and run. Their bows were for hunting and not that powerful. Their scattered arrows were more annoying than deadly. It was more like a waste of everyone's time, but if the enemy didn't have cavalry to chase them down, or heavy archers to pick them off, this harassment could wear them down. Once morale hit rock bottom, the elite wolf cavalry and heavy cavalry from the big clans would charge in, shattering the enemy's lines. They'd find the perfect spot to attack. The wolf riders tearing through the ranks while the heavy cavalry punched through and circled back for another run. With the front lines broken, the harassing cavalry and light cavalry would charge in with spears and sabers, finishing off the survivors. It was a tactic that worked well on the plains. Even with the monsters around, the scouts have already mapped out the route. The veteran pulled a sheepskin map from his gear. This year's Royal Games are being held here. The main event is the hunt. So, hunting. The recruits knew what that meant. Hunting was the ultimate test of a man's worth on the grasslands, and the princes loved showing off their strength this way, and nothing was better than hunting monsters. That's why they were here, in this vast wilderness teeming with oversized beasts and even legendary monsters. Whoever bagged the biggest prize would be the top dog at court. The recruit was less concerned with the intricacies of courtly games. They rode along the dirt road, where patches of green were starting to emerge. Overhead, the branches of the trees on either side intertwined, creating a canopy that blocked out the sun. "Don't worry, the outpost will have plenty of meat and the best eastern wine." "All the good stuff," the veteran chuckled, reining in his horse and patting the recruit's shoulder. Good wine and barbecue solved everything, but as the recruit looked at the dark forests on either side, he couldn't shake the feeling that ancient horrors lurked within. Even surrounded by hundreds of riders, he felt a chill. He thought of the tree monsters from the legends, those who lured travelers into the woods, only to devour them. Their group, a mishmash of small clans, was mostly light cavalry, with only one priest. The powerful warriors and wolf riders from the big clans weren't with them. If they ran into a tree monster, they'd be wiped out. These small clan warriors were just here for a chance at winter rations. The harvest had been bad, and hunting and raiding weren't going well. Collective hunting was safer than some grand ideal touted by the upper crust. "Cheer up. Maybe you'll catch a giant wolf to ride. Don't overthink this hunt. That's for the princes to worry about." The veteran was bored and trying to make conversation. "There's another team ahead of us anyway. If something goes down, it'll happen to them first." "No, I'm telling you, something feels wrong." Just then, the two of them, riding in the middle of the formation, saw the leader stop. A commotion rippled through the front ranks. They halted and saw the blood splattered on the road. All the blood trails led into the forest, fresh, but cold. The ground was gouged and dented from heavy blows. The team ahead had been completely annihilated. Li Yan watched as the tall sapling carefully sorted through the bows, arrows, short swords, long swords, and other weapons, placing them into a huge basket carried by a slightly larger tree. Trees didn't need weapons that were so small. Even the smallest tree demon couldn't pull the largest longbow. Throwing stones was more their speed. Even if they were closer than the longbow's range, these could be sold for a small fortune. Bundled into sets, he'd be rich off the weapons he'd claimed alone. He only kept some of the horses, not because he didn't want them all. The smaller Traians were too slow. Even the fastest one couldn't catch the frightened horses before they scattered. If Ji Lin was here, I'd tell him a story. Swift as the wind, tree/dwarf, high morale, rat/goblin. He was following Ji Lin's advice. Find a large forest, set up vine traps and thorny roots, kill anyone who comes close, and retreat. The Traians were too slow to move over long distances. It was better to find a large forest and build a trap. He'd found a pretty big forest for his Traians to slowly move into. The trees here were huge, otherwise, his Traians wouldn't have been able to squeeze through the gaps. It was harder for his hero unit, the ancient tree. The 70-foot tree was conspicuous and wouldn't be able to squeeze into the forest without clearing a wide path. Reluctantly, he had the tree take root at the edge of the forest and wait, while he began extending the spike traps, using himself as the center. When Li Yan needed it, he'd call in a long-range attack. He ordered the tree to take root at the forest's edge, and let the spiked roots sink into the ground as a trap. When an enemy moved over them, they'd burst from the ground and cause minor damage. After acquiring the ancient tree of knowledge, the ancient tree could slowly transmit the low-level spells it had developed to the other Traians. With the help of the elemental tower and the moon spring, all 200 Traians in the territory had learned the low-level general spell of spiked roots. Spiked roots was a divine spell, but spell civilization could imitate its operation mode and develop its own spells from it. Soon, he had his first harvest. A team of light cavalry riding down the road, completely unaware of the danger. They stepped onto the ground covered with thorny roots and were wiped out in a panic. There was still a long time to go. He could build the fortifications he needed in peace. Li Yan had no intention of attacking that lucky team. He'd already used up the traps he'd set, and any fight now would be costly. Tree demon, sapling, melee defense, 40, movement speed, 2.5 mph, armor strength, 45, 40 plus 5, organization/morale, 75, weapon power, 45, 40 plus 5, features, swift as the wind, tree. This unit often moves faster than expected for its type, spiked roots. Passive plus 5 weapon power, plus 5 armor strength, spiked roots, active this unit can grow its roots deep into the ground after taking root, continuously slowing and damaging enemies within a 115-foot radius tree. This unit can slowly recover its injuries and shell after leaving battle, cause fear. This unit can inflict higher morale damage on the enemy. Fear flame, receives 25% additional flame damage. Shoo, the tree you see may not be a tree. This is an attribute that doesn't take up text. That's it for tonight. I've been thinking about the outline all day. I need to rest. I still owe one update, which I'll make up for tomorrow. Good night. Chapter 68 Inspection. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The system interface popped up the second the light hit me. Please select your target. Plan, hunt. Reveals the locations of all monster infantry and behemoths within a 25-mile radius, one-time use. Plan, hold. Fortification construction speed increased by 10%, engineering troop construction speed increased by an additional 10%, and you get an extra defensive building led by you. Plan, expedition. Provides a 20-day supply of high-energy, compressed rations. This exercise battlefield lasts for 90 to 120 days. Plan your supplies accordingly. Point 3 plans, 3 paths. Hunt means hunting monsters, the mission objective in this battlefield. Hold means defending the farming civilization. Expedition means plundering the nomadic civilization. Lords who invest in military construction will validate their efforts here. Those focused solely on farming will face a tough test. The resources spent by a lord to build buildings is not a small amount. Some farming lords might try to just hand over resources to NPCs to preserve them, but if you try to hoard resources, the system will just take them. He had no engineering troops, no temporary defenses, and his current army composition was poorly suited for defense, a mix of ranged infantry and heavy cavalry. No rapid system construction support here. You have to rely on engineering troops to build fortifications and defense towers. These temporary towers offer excellent defense. An engineer unit can build various temporary defenses, making them essential for garrisoning. The only downside is suppressing their special abilities early on, except for the short ones. Temporary buildings like that can also be added directly to the colonization queue of lords, but that's another story. A 20-day supply from the expedition. Each soldier starts with limited resources. Every 30 days, they can get combat supplies from their leader, including food, ammo, and equipment. Too many supplies slow you down. Too few, and your army can't endure. The expedition's 20-day high-energy food supply frees up carrying space, letting a unit move fast while still having basic supplies. He chose to hunt. Ji Lin currently had a musketeer unit with ultra-high armor penetration and single-shot power. Against conventional troops, their heavy muskets could break through shields. The only downside was their slow reloading. When fighting small groups of monster infantry, one volley would wipe them out, so reloading wasn't a problem. In the Empire, feudal era, monster infantry could be hunted without taking any damage, unless you were unlucky enough to run into a spiritual unit. Selection completed. Prepare for arrival. He closed his eyes, fell, his feet landed on soft grass, and a breeze brushed his face. He had left the preparation area and officially entered the battlefield. Hundreds of lords were starting a long battle on this wild plain, along with monsters, NPCs. And other lords, behind him, his 2 hero units donned gray-black military uniforms. One was Chongheng, his battle commander, and the other was the dean in charge of maintenance. It was a little degrading to have a dean in charge of maintenance, but he lacked the leadership. A dedicated team of mechanics would be great. Musketeers in iron-gray breastplates, carrying heavy muskets, marched out of the light. Behind them were light crossbowmen with short spears and light crossbows. The light crossbow had no close combat ability. Unlike the musketeers with bayonets, Ji Lin equipped each of them with a short spear as a backup. He hoped his ranged infantry would never need bayonets or spears. A group of calf-high hunting spiders crawled out of the light, arranging themselves erratically under Chongheng's whistle commands. Back in the wild, they seemed more active than usual. Then, a hoarse, mechanically unstable cry echoed from the light. Woo! Boom! Ji Lin recognized it. The terrifying cry of the steam spider, rampaging through the steam and steel dungeon. A sound of steel friction, hydraulic transmissions, and micro-repulsion runes. They landed with a thud, their jointed legs supporting their weight so they didn't sink into the mud. Even the disciplined musketeers gave these metal monsters a wide berth. Even at a distance of more than 10 feet, they stepped out slowly, lined up, then retracted their pointed feet and settled into a standby position in the field. A wave spread out from him, marking all monster infantry and behemoth units within 25 miles. The system marked everything, including those belonging to other lords and NPCs. Information is invaluable. This showed him all potential threats within his radius, giving him time to prepare. There were 27 monster infantry settlements and 2 behemoth units within 25 miles, very good. He would start with the nearest monster infantry, or maybe find another lord and test the power of these mobile water heaters. He regretted never commanding this type of monster cavalry in the dungeon. Anything much larger than a horse could be called a monster, or freak. They came in different shapes with strange abilities, but were rare. They might be creations of civilization or nature. Either way, lords controlled them as part of their troops. Different monster auxiliary troops had their own characteristics: steam spider, monster shock cavalry, melee defense, 15, movement speed, 22 mph, armor strength, 50, 70 to 20, weapon power, 140, 165 to 25, features, steam jet, unstable boiler, never defeated, shock the enemy, infantry unit, charge, formation destroyer, temporary structure. This unit isn't the final product. Its attributes are defective, and its failure rate is higher than finalized units. Pay attention to the usage specifications. Stay at least 30 feet away after the battle starts. Watch out for explosions. It had 20 points less armor and 25 points less weapon power than the normal steam spider. Even with the substandard steel, 50 armor was still pretty good. Ji Lin was satisfied. Most ranged weapons wouldn't penetrate that. The 25-point weapon power reduction was due to lower boiler temperature and pressure, weakening the steam jet. A speed of 22 miles per hour was enough to avoid most projectiles, and it could still launch a devastating charge with overloaded boilers. As for melee. Sorry, you didn't want it getting into melee range. That meant it would attack, spraying boiling water and high-temperature steam. Ji Lin led his army toward the nearest map marker. Chapter 69 Corrupted Crab and Cicada. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the distance, the decaying swamp reeked of death, littered with the corpses of countless creatures. It wasn't large, maybe the size of 2 football fields, an unexpected festering pit in the middle of the desolate plain. It felt like the system had just dropped it there. The stench, the gray, silt-covered mounds, and the pervasive smell of death hung heavy in the air. A light gray fog seemed to cling to the swamp's surface. The closest monster infantry unit was lurking in this mire. Based on what he could see, this area was populated by spiritual monster infantry, but he couldn't yet determine their specific type. Without advanced reconnaissance technology, he was relying solely on sight. A typical lord might have some feudal-era technology by now, but his development path was more eccentric, not the steady progress of others. Until he had a clearer picture of the battlefield, Ji Lin wasn't risking a direct confrontation. Moving troops blindly into an unknown situation was a bad idea. First, he needed to scout the area with his generals to ensure no one interfered with his plans. The best way to gather intel was for the commander to get it firsthand. This allowed for immediate access to battlefield information, ensuring orders could be transmitted directly to the troops without unnecessary delays. Troops under such leadership would exhibit remarkable flexibility on the battlefield, or die trying. Commanders on the front lines were far more effective than those who preferred the safety of a command tent. The downside: a significantly higher injury rate. Not everyone had the guts to face death. Should he abandon this odd move? Change direction and find easier monster infantry to hunt, monster foot, as he'd started calling them? Ji Lin remained crouched in the grass, continuing his observation. Wait, were there that many large, similar mounds in the swamp? The protruding earth was coated in dark mud. Ji Lin smiled as he watched the mounds slowly shifting through the mire. once he confirmed the strange movements were indeed monster infantry, the system information finally popped up, corrupted demon crab, monster infantry, 3 rare, melee defense, 45, movement speed, 10 km/h, armor strength, 120, morale/organization, 45, weapon power, 80, characteristics, lingering spirit, this unit is animated by a lingering spirit. It will not flee and will not be penalized for morale/organization. However, when morale is low, it will directly enter an unstable state and directly lose hit points, ashes to ashes, the magical energy sustaining the spirit is failing, and it will ultimately turn to dust. When defeat is certain, the unit will suffer extreme damage until it dies, concealment, this unit can effectively hide in various complex environments, forests, underwater, swamps, etc. Resist charge, large. This unit reduces the charge bonus of large units when in good formation. These deadly, dangerous arthropods lurk in the mire, tearing apart anything that dares come near them. Corrupted demon crabs. So that's what they are. Was he facing an entire nest of these things? Their ultra-high armor of 120 meant that only his musketeers could deal significant damage. The musketeers' long range and armor-piercing capabilities, especially when targeting vulnerable joints, would minimize the impact of the crab's high armor. As for the light crossbows with their minimal weapon power, they barely scratched the surface. Even with flaming bolts, Ji Lin looked at the cart-sized corrupted demon crabs lumbering through the muck and figured a volley of arrows might as well be throwing pebbles. Spiders and crabs were both arthropods, but his steam spider had 2 fewer pincers than these things. The high-temperature steam penetration damage wasn't very effective against same-level monster infantry, and the steam spider's body likely couldn't withstand the impact of the corrupted demon crab's claws. The wild elves, lacking direct orders, would act on instinct. Maybe he could use traps to deal with these wild corrupted demon crabs, like he'd done with the bone beasts before. As Ji Lin plotted his strategy, the hunting spider next to him signaled danger. As a scout, it had picked up an unfamiliar scent in the air. Someone else was here, another lord, and they'd stumbled upon each other. He'd been right not to bring his troops. The scout hunting spider's abilities gave him an advantage. A surprise attack could decide a quick skirmish. He had positioned his troops a kilometer away, in a spot he'd carefully chosen based on his experience. Behind a sloping hillside with a wide field of vision, the high slope offered no cover, and any troops charging up would be caught in a crossfire, keeping low. Using the bushes for cover, Ji Lin whispered to Changheng to exchange information. Following the spider's gaze, they peered through the bushes and spotted a group of shield-bearing infantry in gleaming white armor marching in a tight formation, leaving a highly visible trail. They carried square shields in their left hands and sharp spears in their right. The lord, decked out in thick armor and riding a tall white horse, strolled confidently at the head of the shield-bearing infantry, as if he were out for a picnic. Trailing behind was a unit of light cavalry, riding white horses similar to the lord's, carrying long spears, and wearing special sabers on their waists. They weren't wearing heavy armor, just light barding on their horses. Ji Lin and Changheng quietly counted them, 6 in total. With that many horses, it seemed he had found a horse farm and successfully domesticated them. Otherwise, buying those horses would cost a fortune, not to mention equipping so many infantry with iron armor. A little envious. Another update is coming later.